Good afternoon. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you. Please take seat. We're very happy for this almost final session, the penultimate session. We have a great panel, and we'll talk about AI. We know that you're all fascinated by this topic. So we mentioned that there's been a lot of questions around AI, you know. So in this plenary session called, you know, AI States Inversion of the Power Struggle, Aiman EZZAT, who is Director General of Capgemini, then Paul HUDSON, Director General of Sanofi, then Jacques ATTALI, and President of ATTALI Associate, and Tatiana Jama, who is a lawyer, entrepreneur, and she was entrepreneur for 15 years, you know, and then she sold her business to Amazon. You know, it has to be mentioned. She's an investor, and she's the origin of associations which work in the digital world. She's also a member of the National Council of the Digital National Council. Then a couple of words of introduction, then I give the floor. First, I want to start with a clarification which may be of importance. We might come back to it. Generative AI is recent, quite new. We've talked about it a lot. The fact that it will generate content, images, text, whatever, from huge quantities of data which is provided to it during this training session. We discovered that with ChatGPT. I'm sure a lot of you tried. AI, artificial intelligence per se, you know, is older. You can do complex calculation and refers to all form of machine learning and smart automation. So the title of the session refers us to the way AI, and more specifically generative AI, GAI, could be a threat for democracy or for the economy. Especially when you see the GAFAM, but not just the GAFAM, but also the global power struggles which are being constructed. Now, just a feedback in history. In 1872, British writer Samuel Butler published a novel in which there were two groups of individuals. There were those who fought for the machines and those who feared that they would be replaced. Each time there is an innovation, we hear the same thing. We heard that with railways and Luddite and whatever. The economic history shows that innovation can be feared, but also quite desirable. So again, we see this discussion with AI. I almost want to say even more so between the people who wish to doom the doomers, the disillusionists, and the techno-optimistic. Well, first they said there would be manipulation of information. They do exist. Disinformation, loss of control of a smart system, of AI systems, and the models can do non-desired actions, lead to accidents when it comes to cybersecurity. And maybe we've crossed a step versus other innovation. And it is quite a different form of worries than for the techno-optimistic, and in some domains, such as healthcare. We'll discuss it with Paul HUDSON. We know that artificial intelligence is an amazing opportunity. It is the poison and the remedy, you know, the pharmacon, which is a drug, and you can have a drug and a poison. So what's the position, the role of the states? How can they promote the development of AI or support it or help it, promote research linked to it, and protect institutions, individual citizens from the potential dangers thereof? So how can we reverse the power struggle? So clearly, lots of questions are still open. I mentioned a few. Well, there is the issue of job destruction. We talked about that. They're likely, but there will be job creations. It is the so-called creative destruction that you all know, and the promises in terms of productivity, skills, competence. Two-second measure question. Will AI improve the well-being of citizens? Which is, in fact, the most important question. Under which condition? And are these conditions? Do these conditions belong to the states, to the individuals, organizations, NGOs, associations, and so on and so forth? In which case, where does the power lie? Let's start with Aiman, EZZAT, Capgemini. Simple question: how does Capgemini, in its processes, how do you use AI? You do your advisor, your consulting. So how do you advise them? That's it. I'll come back to the rest. Thank you. Hello. Hi. So for AI and generative AI, it's a technology. So our business is to help companies to appropriate this technology and that it is useful for their business. Generative AI is new. AI is not new. Before ChatGPT, there were about 30,000 people working in data management and AI. It's not something new. But the fact that AI and generative AI or even technologies will bring in productivity, nothing new. We know that the tasks have been automated in human resource, logistics, supply chain, whatever. So whenever there is a new technology, we see the same fears. Especially, we talked first about productivity. Productivity, major productivity jumps. IMF report last year said 300, 400 million jobs could be at risk. Of course, soon we realize that that's not the way it goes. It's more complicated. Productivity levels are not there. Actually, they're much weaker, and it takes more time. So there is productivity with generative AI because we can use beyond data. We can use text, voice, other forms of information, which gives a context, and therefore, at the end, people are more productive. Now, can we automatize massively all jobs? No. There is a report from a recent economist from the MIT, and he considered that the impact on the global productivity of generative AI will be 4 to 5% after 10 years. No, it's reality. Change will take place through people. We change processes, work method. We have to train people. Use cases step by step. We've done almost 600 projects in generative AI. We got about almost 1,800 pending. We've done a lot of progress. A lot of expectations have been produced through generative AI for massive productivity gains. I've seen managers 10, 15 months ago assess through generative AI. I don't need to have software developers, and I cost my IT cost by 50%. Well, they came back because productivity levels are not there. Cost cutting is much lower, and it's in fact more complicated. I think beyond that, and there are many aspects around innovation. The discovery of new drugs. We try to manage it, telco networks more efficiently. So there are opportunities in terms of creation of value. We underestimate, but we stigmatize people in terms of productivity. Now, when it comes to the public-private, I think there should be more work together between public-private in this domain. Of course, there are the regulation dimensions. We need that for any new technology. There must be regulation, but let's be careful here. The AI European Act is not good. It went too far. We have to reduce the risk, but we cannot remove the risk. If we try to remove the risk, you kill innovation. We're going too far. With the AI Act, we try to regulate technology, not the use of technology. The initial orientation was good. Let's supervise the models, the most risky models. But today we are interfering with the technological development, and then people will run away. And the last point, just for the positioning of France in terms of AI, we're in a good position. We have very good research centers, very good competence. A lot of people invest. So I consider that France could be at the top in terms of AI development, but also show the model what can be done with AI in an ethical, responsible way, and especially for data protection. Now, I'm turning to Paul. Paul Hudson, maybe in the healthcare field that we expect a lot from AI, research on vaccine, on pandemics, epidemics, drugs, molecules, medical imaging, or algorithm, the radiologist to identify tumors or fractures. But on your website, you say we want to be the first biopharmaceutical corporation that uses AI at a large scale. Now, how do you implement AI, and what are your questions for you?
Well, thank you, and good afternoon. It's great to be here, everybody. Let's be really clear up front that there are more diseases that are untreatable without medicines than there are diseases with medicines. And we've been limited by the size of our laboratories, the brains of our people, and now with this great disruption, there is a moment where we can consider treating diseases or tumor types that simply have no treatment for them. And we must take advantage of it, and we must take advantage of it now. With generative AI and large language models, we have a chance to work real time on how to design molecules that might be able to treat a particular cancer that today is killing people. We have to take that opportunity. We have the opportunity again to simulate what is happening with medicines and what will happen inside a person's body before we even give it to a person, so that we can avoid side effects and challenges that they may face if they're on treatments for a long period of time. What you may not know is it takes about 15 years to make a medicine. And in that 15 years, 5 years in, there is a 90% chance of failure. 12 years in, there is a 35% chance of failure. And it takes about 3 billion euros to have a shot at 65% chance of success 12 years into the program. If we can use artificial intelligence and generative AI to improve the probability of success at each, even by 5% or 10%, we could save so many more lives. We can be more efficient with capital, which we can redeploy to treat untreatable diseases. Put simply, we use large language models and machine learning to identify targets and find new drugs. We use generative AI right now to write documents for us that we submit to the regulators. When we drive, and we drive to the FDA in the US, we take 6 trucks of paper that takes them 1 year to read before they can approve a medicine. And we can shorten that to days and do real-time simulation with the regulator for a better outcome by using Gen AI. We don't use these tools to reduce jobs. We use these tools to get our people to focus on insights, action, and not on summarizing and bringing together large data sets. It's just not the world anymore, right? It's just not appropriate. I say to my own children, don't use ChatGPT. It's cheating if you're at university. And they laugh. And they say, you used to go to the library to look for a book, to write an essay, and somebody had already hidden the book somewhere else in the library because they didn't want you to have it. So you were competing with them. I'm like, really? The truth is the world moved on. Lastly, there's snackable AI, and we have 18,000 people using snackable AI every day. And what do we mean by that? Well, put simply, when you may be familiar with Waze, the driving app that helps you get around. You got to get in the car, you have to start the engine, you drive, and it says turn left or turn right. And you know it's probably right, even if sometimes you think you know better. You don't. It's large language models, it's huge amounts of data, it's open, and we want our people, now 18,000 people, when they go to work, can look at the app, look at the notification. It might say, you might want to spend time on this subject today, because it's an opportunity you are missing. Turn left or turn right. And we feel that is the best way to free the full insight and power of our people. We have to do it responsibly, and whether we have time to get to that, ethically, equitably, of course, but entrepreneurial. And Aiman says a very important point. We have a great partnership, by the way. You can't write regulation and policy to start defensively. You're already disconnected from the competitive global economy, but you must not suppress the opportunity for people to take advantage. For us, the Rubicon we do not cross is patient data. We may look for patterns in data, but patient data is sacrosanct. Patients' individual data is theirs and theirs only, or theirs and their physician. That's the road you never cross. Everything else is about finding new medicines faster. And for us in Sanofi, we are absolutely the leading healthcare company in the adoption of AI.
I confirm that, Biden. Je confirme.
Thank you. Turning to Jacques ATTALI, who has significant views on the relationship between Europe, the US, and I have a question to you on the role of France and Europe in this world and with AI. European startups exist, you know, Mistral AI for France, Lef Alpha for Germany, for example, but they're small, they're minute versus what is being done in the US or even in our country, in China. Now, how can we be in competition with fight against American giants? Well, we said we can be competitive for the fabrication of models. For the rest, no. We need the Google, Amazon server, you know, and others. So what do you think about this international war? Well, I'm a small shareholder of Mistral, so. But I'll come back to the beginning. I'll go back to the beginning. First, I think this word is it's not intelligence, artificial. It is intelligence. It is in the English sense of the word, which is not intelligence in the French meaning of the word. It's not artificial. The true word would be automatic prediction. It is a small step in the long chain of the evolution of automation, manipulation of information, which started with the Blaise Pascal machine in 1614, which continued with, you know, all the machines and Turing and so on and so forth. And it will continue, a small step. In this small step, there are two different dimensions. Prediction, automatic prediction at the industrial level, and the ALLM, that is the other distinction. But anyway, industrial production, it's huge field. It's you want to avoid failures, leakages, to do predictive maintenance, to detect a certain number of anomalies before they take place. You know, there's a predictive potential which is huge. By the way, versus what Aiman said early on, there is a huge mystery which is not on our AI, but for 30 years there is an increase of innovation, and 30 that there is no increase in productivity, not just AI. So there is a mystery there, which is we explain for another reason, which is not today's topic, that innovation does not increase productivity. Innovation does not increase productivity, and this is the case for 30 years. So it's not specific to AI. So, having said that, I do believe in predictive maintenance, industrial artificial intelligence, and I doubt the so-called generative AI, because first, there is a lot of it has a lot of difficulty. ChatGPT doesn't work. The results are fairly poor. It's less than Google, not as good as Google when we look for information. It's full of hallucination, and when you know how it is done, it is really makeshift. It's like a garage technology, with this model. We don't know how this model functions, and we have to. Well, it is something that could be quite a disappointment in the long term. So I think there's huge potential in the healthcare, for example, just as you mentioned, Paul. A lot of domains will be great for countries in the south because we'll be able to do remote education, remote healthcare, and we'll be able, in the huge growth of Indian and African population, well, possibly solve the great danger of lack of education and the healthcare for them. Thanks to telemedicine and teleeducation, this is a great progress. But for the rest, we must look at it as a step. And back to your question, France and Europe should today get ready for the next steps. Okay, we missed the previous steps, fair enough. But the next steps, what are the next steps? Nanotechnology, biotechnologies, and quantum IT. This is quantum IT. This is where we have to shoot the targets in front of us, not the one behind us. So you have to look for the targets ahead, not target behind. This is where we should go. Now, if we clearly, and this is where states should invest. This is where states should invest. Research, training, and so on and so forth, and education. So we've made a lot of mistakes in France, especially recently, when created the condition for young girls to no longer become engineers. We're going to pay this mistake for 20 years. So anyway, train engineers, you know, look for the jobs of the day after tomorrow and not yesterday, and don't see AI as a saving process. It's a link in a long chain. Now, Tatiana Jama, you are quite a courier, as I said earlier, and I wanted to ask you, because when I was preparing this session, we thought there will be a topic, and it had to be put on the table today, just before the election. How do you see the development of AI that would work for the defense of democracy, that would work for democracy, versus, you know, versus what we see in social networks? I know you've pondered that quite a lot. It's a great question. Yes, indeed, we've talked about it. You know, AI is an exceptional opportunity for all of us, for the CAC, for the financial, for high-level athletes, for activists, you know, entrepreneurs, investors, but under one condition only, and it is an indispensable element to link up the world. We maintain democracy. We need to maintain democracy. And we do realize that we're facing a world today where there are two major challenges, and challenges that have to be faced together, and we are all concerned. First major challenge, the notion of truth. What is truth and trust? And then the second is the problematic of oligopoly and monopolies. I was a lawyer. I was a lawyer. If I talk as an investor, I have to do risk assessment. AI risks are not linked to destruction of jobs or the end of mankind, but in its ability to produce false contents. Tomorrow, it will be almost impossible to make a difference between true content from false content. You know, fake news from real news, text, image, videos. We get a lot of files, dossiers on this, on logics of identification, authenticization of control. And science says there is no lasting solution to this problem. I don't know if you all agree, but basically, let's face it, there is no solution to this problematic. Therefore, what are we going to do if we have a general loss in trust? And democracy cannot be based on truth. And we see two main approaches, a preventive approach and an educative approach. Preventive approach consists in concentrating on the credibility vector. You will focus on the channel and not on the message. And this has been adopted by Taiwan, where citizens in Taiwan know that by default everything is false. Because if it has to come from a governmental number with a government with a phone number. Another method consists in going to education. But you know, now, the problem is that our brains, when it comes to algorithm and so on, and a lot of sociologists said that our brains are more appetite for sexual and violent content. We don't want to have interesting information. But so basically, what do we do to educate and to create some sort of cognitive security to distinguish between false and truth? One element is trust. How do we get to the point where we can trust ourselves, our ability to make a difference? How can we reinforce our scope of trust, which today are in poor posture, especially media and research? The second major topic are the main problematic is, of course, the monopolies or oligopolies. I mean, the social networks played a role in the last elections. So what will happen with Gen AI or personal AI? Of course, we will ask them, you know, to give us news, but also to give us an opinion. We on, you know, workers, the Rencontres Économiques or Middle East conflict. What will the AI say? Well, as a function of the cultural substrate on which it's been trained, it's called the algorithmic ghetto. The difference will be different or not, but different versions do not exist because we are in this logic of monopoly. There is one good news, though, which is, as you said, Françoise, we are late, but to emerge in an exceptional company, which is the only one which is independent and capable of doing that, and it is a French company. It is Mistral. And that's exceptional. Let me finish by saying that the concerns around AI is something that is very European. All totalitarian states, all chaos engineers, do not worry about that. We must massively invest in AI because technological sovereignty comes before the economic sovereignty, which precedes the political sovereignty. Thank you very much.
N'hésitez pas à intervenir.
Please do get involved if you want to. So perhaps a question about data, health data. This is a key issue. In France, we're a bit hesitant about this. We don't want health data to be made available. We have to have prior authorizations. Is this a question for you, Sanofi, or is this something that needs to be regulated?
But earlier, which is that individual healthcare data is a line never to be crossed, and it doesn't need to be crossed. I'll give you an example. We have an amazing partnership with a French AI company called Okin, and they use what's called federated learning, which you may or may not be aware of, which is where they train their algorithm on data in hospitals. The algorithm goes into the data set at the hospital. It learns with pattern recognition what a tumor and tumor growth may look like in oncology. The algorithm then leaves the servers of the hospital with no data, zero. All you have is a better educated model with empty for data. And what does that do? Well, that first of all doesn't compromise a single human being's data. That is, again, sacrosanct. But you have a model that is trained on a much broader data set, which may then be reapplied to help find a cancer in another patient, specifically somewhere else in France or the world. And we need to take advantage of that opportunity, and we need to use the tools in a way that is, of course, clearly responsible. But if we are hesitant or frightened to aggregate data and look for patterns, we're really missing out. And I think you used the word Luddite at the beginning of your presentation. It's not a word you hear very often. In fact, not for a couple of hundred years, but actually it's a word you're hearing again now, because our opportunity to be scared is greater, sadly, than the risk that we're taking on behalf of patients. We simply can't remain in a world where some diseases have no medicine. And by looking at larger data sets, we might be able to target it. And we have to be respectful. So federated learning, using our own data. And we just signed a unique collaboration with OpenAI. And, you know, spent time with Sam Altman and the team. And I think you referenced it, Jacques, that sometimes it may not be better than Google as a search tool. And what we're trying to do is to use our data to customize GPT-5, potentially 6 and 7, so that it's more accurate first time. And people say to me, well, why would you do that, Paul? Why would you share your data with people? Because I'm in healthcare. And so in the end, I joined healthcare to make people's lives better. And I would like all boats to rise in terms of understanding what it takes to find drugs for diseases that people die from. Then I will compete with Pfizer or AstraZeneca or Lilly. That's fine, that's my job. But in the meantime, I have to make sure that everybody shares the tools to have a better shot at treating diseases. So data, never patient data, absolutely patent data, anonymized, and absolutely for the betterment of society. There's a non-negotiable.
Peut-être une question à vous, Aiman EZZAT.
Perhaps a question to you, Aiman EZZAT. In the report that was delivered to Emmanuel Macron by Philippe Aguillon and Anne Beauvau, there is a recommendation for world governance. What do you think about that? Do you think we need to move in that direction? When you speak with your businesses, are they hesitant about this kind of initiative, or are they in favor of it? No, they really are in favor of it. And the problem we have today at a European level even is that we're going to roll out the AI Act in different countries in Europe. So imagine a business that does research on molecules. If there's different regulations in each country, it's going to be really very complicated. How are they going to roll this out within their business? We've also already got enormous problems around data because the rules about data are different for different countries. When we put in place projects and we work with customers to see how we can process the data and who we are to access it and in which way, now we're looking at regulations of models. So we're going to be thinking that such and such a task will be put in place, be handled by such and such a model. Well, if this model has to behave differently depending on the different country, that's going to be an absolute nightmare for businesses. So we really need to think about worldwide governance in order to reduce risk for businesses in terms of their operation. In the AI Act, there are 100 articles. I don't think no business has yet really apprehended what that means for them and how they're going to manage risk in the future. So having something common across the world is really going to help businesses in terms of managing risks and defining the ethics of how to operate and how to protect data and help their customers. Tatiana, perhaps I could come back to you. I know that you spoke earlier about Mistral. Yes, we have this startup, but how do you see this world of startups in the world of artificial intelligence? Are we seeing lots of developments here, and are any women involved? Thank you for that question. So yes, where are the women? That's a really good question. I started as an entrepreneur in 2009, and I thought we were in a meritocracy. And I was able to sell my first business, and I was able to raise funds, and I thought, yes, brilliant. We really can go up the social ladder through entrepreneurship. 10 years later, I started counting. And I realized that over the last 10 years, if we take all the venture capital, only 2% of that money is invested in female entrepreneurs. Last year it was 1.8%. 2% is less than a tip at a restaurant. That just is nothing. So I decided to launch an investment fund called Sister Fund, which has an objective 100 million euros to fund female entrepreneurs and teams working with equality between men and women. This has been an area in entrepreneurship from the beginning, and it's even more the case now with AI, because we have decreasing numbers of female engineers who are launching businesses. There's one positive point, is that we do have entrepreneurs who are increasingly, and just to be clear, we're not being sponsored here by Mistral, but Alto Mensch, who leads Mistral, they have a full equality, full parity between men and women in their team. And so we need to talk about this. We need to understand that the biases that we are victims of are programmed into us. It's not a problem. We just need to understand that and work to change it. And together, men and women together, we need to make sure that tech becomes more, we have more parity in tech. Otherwise, we're going to see an increase of inequalities. And since we already don't have great parity, if this develops and increases, it's really not going to be good. We're going to create an even toxic situation. French tech, at the moment, we're not sure whether we have solutions, but we're trying to develop an active, proactive policy, because we can't EP with teams where we have 80% men in our teams, in these engineering teams, developing these businesses. I really do think that we can do this. We have a business with 300,000 people, and we have 38% women, and we're a technology team. I've been working on this for years. If we go for it, we can move this forward. I think this is possible. We have an objective of 40% for 2025, and we're going to make it. How many in your executive committee? I've got 30%, and we're committed to go to 40%.
Agree, of course, with all of you, but my daughter did a master's in engineering at UC Berkeley, and it was quite interesting. They made her come 8 weeks before it started, and she had to learn how to raise capital, how to incorporate a business, how to structure a company, how to plan for equity, how to be deposed, how to protect intellectual property. And they brought alumni back to the university who were experts in all these areas, and she had to pass the entrepreneur boot camp before she could enter the Masters in Engineering, so that she wouldn't be intimidated by any man or any venture fund who tried to tell her different. Now, sadly, she ended up at Tesla, prototyping, but their generation, which I hold out the most hope for, still believe that they can be the next female, founders and unicorns. And I wonder how many universities try and equip female engineers to go on to do these sort of things. Not many, I would imagine. Certainly, perhaps not in France.
Merci. Une question à Jacques.
Thank you very much. Jacques Attali, there's a question here. You might have heard of the fact that a Japanese writer recently was awarded a contract, and he said he was going to write using artificial intelligence, and that created no issue in Japan, but actually it would probably have been an issue in France. I think often in the cultural sector we talk about what's going in the economy and and society in general, but the first AI strike took place in Hollywood with the script writers. You've written an excellent book recently, which is a chronicle of what's happening in the musical sector through artificial intelligence, with a lot of questions about the way in which it is fed and trained through existing songs, which raises questions about copyright, etc., and how we should respect authors. Well, you have summarized really what I said in the book. So it's true that music has always been ahead of other domains because it's a completely intangible area, so it can explore potential much quicker than others. The only other areas that go faster are maths and finance, which are really very light in terms of material, so they can really explore potentials very quickly. It's true that today, music is always a step ahead in terms of the key transitions. And there's this explosion of questions of copyright, of creation, of ownership. It links into what you said about truth, but authenticity as well, which is not the same thing as truth. So there are some enormous issues that are going to come up here. And I think they're opening up in, I think, a really positive way. And in terms of what you said earlier, on my left, there's this question of who is speaking. Music is ahead of the game, and when it created this scandal by creating music through a mix of other musics, which is what DJs do, is music. It's DJs do that, and it's music. They use existing music. It's perhaps not the type of music I would like, but it's a mix of different types of music. And what you're doing in pharmacy, in pharmaceutical companies, you're doing the same thing. You're taking things that exist already and you put them together as a cocktail to make other things. So we really need to get used to this. We need to get used to being within hybrid worlds where there's a mixture and a blending. Blending is a good thing. Blending between real and virtual, blending of different sources, that's a good thing, and we really need to accept it. And creativity always comes from breaking out of a single sector or domain. New things always come when we make a connection between different domains. When we make a connection between the real and the virtual, we can see breakthroughs. We can see this in the history of art. The hardest issue is truth, because this is really very key. Because the ground is going to open up beneath us if in 3 years, in X, we have holograms of us who are saying the opposite of what we actually think. That could be possible in 10 years' time. In order to avoid that, we need to invest a lot, and I think it's possible. We need to invest into having applications that meet this question. I cannot understand why Pinterest can show me a picture of a flower and tell me the name of this application, and I have the Shazam application which makes it possible to name a musical work, and that there's no application that tells me whether what you're saying is true or false. That should exist. That really should be possible. Perhaps that will exist one day, but once again, all of marking and fingerprinting technologies are not working in a long-term way. But what we can do is educate. Once again, there's a wonderful initiative from the National Digital Council in France, which is trying to drive forward public digital policy, and they've recently announced an initiative called Caféir. And we've got lots of ambassadors for pushing forward this initiative. The goal is not to train, but to create a culture of reading. The problem is that everyone wants to train people today, but before we end up training people, people need to want to be trained. And the work that we've done, where we've got about 100, even thousands of meetings with people around France to bring people together and talk about our worries about artificial intelligence and reinvent the narrative around AI and make it more positive. This would make it possible for us to be a technological giant, but it's going to be impossible if we don't take the whole population with us. Perhaps I could say something very briefly, but then perhaps we could hear from the audience. But in terms of world regulations, there were laws that were put in place in the 1930s and 1940s. Japanese have done some amazing things. UNESCO has done work on artificial intelligence. But what's most likely is that we'll end up putting in place standards which will be imposed by the Americans and the Chinese, and the Americans and Chinese will not follow them. That's what's going to happen. So any questions in the room? Please do raise your hand if you want to speak. There's 2 questions here right now.
Merci de vous présenter.
Je m'appelle Françoise.
Please do introduce yourselves. I'm François Blondeau. I'm a student. I've just a question about development of AI in Europe. Over the last 20 years, since the development of internet, etc., we've seen that we're dependent on American technologies and now Chinese technologies. And you were saying that we perhaps should be looking to target something else other than artificial intelligence, because Europe has already lost the race. Perhaps we need to... The reality is that the development of AI has opened up a war about the use of data. Would the first step for getting free of American and Chinese technology be to develop our own European businesses like Mistral and others, in order to get ahead of the Americans or the Chinese? Thank you very much. First of all, I don't think we've lost the race on AI. I really do think we have some excellent skills. Where we don't have NVIDIA and Google, we're talking about computing power. Yes, I think we've lost the race in terms of computing power. We don't have the capacity in Europe to develop the necessary computing power, or to develop, like NVIDIA, the different kind of things they're developing. But we can use what they've got. But our added value is going to be in the use and the development of models, and there we have skills. Why? Because even in these models, it's small businesses that are developing this. A business like Mistral, who is a strategic partner, they started with just 5 people. You don't have to have billions of investment to do that. Of course, they've slowly raised funds and now they've got more resources. But we can develop models, including French models or English models, to prevent it just being about American approaches. But we really need to invest, and we need to create an environment where people want to move forward. I'm a bit worried about an excess of regulation, because if we do that, people are going to go and work elsewhere. We need to give them opportunities and create a positive environment so that they can move forward. So there's a question. In fact, there's actually quite a lot of questions I can see. Please. Hi, I am a researcher with the CNRS. I've just got a question about the reconciliation between AI and the ecological transition in terms of the finite nature of resources, and particularly the fact that AI opens up an exponential use of electricity and energy. So how do you see these two phenomena coming together? Who wants to answer that question? Well, it's really very clear that we're heading straight for a wall. We are heading straight for a wall because for a very long time we thought that information could substitute energy. That's true in a lot of areas, but actually the way in which we produce energy, we're in real trouble. So I think the question for me is, what is the source of energy? If the energy source is renewable, sustainable, that's better, but that's not the case in the United States, where most of the sources are present. So there really is a real risk here that the development of AI technologies and digital technologies in general would present a real problem in terms of the climate.
Silicon Valley. And this is a question for Paul, because in medicine you have to go through several approvals in Europe, in the US, in China, everywhere. And I was wondering if he can draw on his ability to actually approve drugs, to give us some insights around what would it take to approve AI in Europe, in the US, and around the world.
So to use AI to approve drugs?
No, just to compare between approving a drug or approving an intelligent artificial framework or application.
I'm not sure I fully understand.
No, it's basically what happens, you approve drugs in different countries. What happens if you have to approve all the AI models in different countries like you have to approve drugs?
Oh, I see what you mean. Well, you know, we have 4 major regulators in Japan, China, the US, and Europe. And here's another small statistic for you, but 50% of the drugs approved in Europe are not available for patients in Europe. Because getting approved is one thing, but where the problem comes, and I think this is where you're heading, is that then each country wants to evaluate the drug again individually for its health economic impact. And often a drug is definitely seen as more expensive than death. Because if a patient with cancer dies, they don't cost anything to treat. But the drug, sounds ridiculous, right? But if the drug costs money versus death, then the drug is not reimbursed because it's considered too expensive. And you can't believe that happens, but it is the absolute truth. That's why 50% of the drugs, and because countries worry about their budget impact, every country negotiates separately. And that's why it takes some countries 4 years to approve a drug, because they delay the negotiations so that patients never get it. So you get a European approval quite, not easily, it's a 1.5-year process, but then you're slowed down. And I fear, to your point on the Act in Europe, that we may see something similar. You may see a European sort of guidance, and then each country deploying a backup set of criteria for sovereignty reasons that, of course, then just make it impossible to compete with China and the US, of which your point I think you made earlier, they won't follow the rules anyway. So we're just making Europe less competitive. And for me in healthcare, less competitive means patients who don't get medicines to keep them alive. And I think that's too high a price, frankly.
May I raise a question to you, Paul, which is just teasing you. Is it not worse in UK than in Europe?
Yeah, so, the question was, is it worse in the UK than Europe? I guess that's because I'm British, you're asking that. Certainly a two-party system moves very quickly in the UK. But the reality is, yeah, I would say the UK is worse, for sure. And, you know, we work very well with the French government on making sure medicines do get made available. We'll find out whether the enthusiasm for healthcare delivery is the same over the coming weeks. But the UK had an opportunity post-Brexit to decide to approve medicines faster than the European Medicines Agency, therefore bring innovation to patients faster because it didn't have to wait. But it has chosen to squander that opportunity. And I think with Keir Starmer and Wes Streeting, the new Ministry of Health, who I wrote to yesterday, the advice we will give them is to make innovation available. And people forget that in Europe, principally many countries, you know, the UK spends around 13 billion on medicines, and it gets around about 34 billion in inward investment in healthcare. So it's net positive by 21 billion. But the Minister of Health will tell you they have no money for medicines, and the Treasury and Finance Minister will tell you we need the inward investment. And then they never talk to each other. And so you end up, the loser, by the way, is the patient. It's not anybody else, because nobody else knows. So it's, for me, I'm 35 years in healthcare. These are the things that break my heart.
Bon, ben, le temps est passé. Le temps est passé extrêmement vite, et peut-être une très très brève conclusion avant que vous alliez goûter le plaisir de la pluie.
So, time has come to an end. But perhaps a very quick conclusion here. We've understood here that Paul Hudson was not only the head of Sanofi, but he was a DJ for the pharmaceutical industry. And so we've learned a lot of things. We've talked about skills, essential skills. We've talked about democratic issues. I think more than ever, this is really important. We talked about sovereignty, we've talked about truth, and of course, this links into the question of democracy. And we've also talked about the importance of putting in place a good worldwide governance. Thank you very much for being here with us at this session. Thank you very much.